talking to clients, when I'm talking to clients or I'm talking to people, very often people overlook this whole part, but really, this is a huge critical part of global sales growth, and it's one of those things that if you do it right, really has the opportunity to drive growth. And so, we're going to just sort of dive into that. And like Melissa said, what I wanted to reiterate, because we're, I guess halfway through the series now, or maybe not halfway, but we're into the series now. The previous videos are available through Melissa. You can reach out to the North Carolina partnership, and they can get you links to the videos so you can watch the previous sessions if you haven't watched them. And for almost all of them, or all of them, there is actually there are really good notes and an ebook generated. So I urge you to reach out for that. And if anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my webpage and ask questions, I am part of the North Carolina team right now, and I'm available to help you out. So if you have questions, you need help, you want a little bit of coaching, just sort of reach out, and I'll find a way to make it work for you. Anyway, so now I'm going to jump in. And like I've said before, and I'm just going to keep reiterating this, there are essentially three ways to grow your international sales, right? You can grow your total addressable market, which means you get into new markets, right? You're finding new distributors in new territories. You can increase your sales hours. That is how many hours you have salespeople selling your product around the world, either by getting more distributors, getting more engagement from those distributors, or getting better distributors that are going to agree to give you more time, right? You can improve your salesperson competency. Okay, what do I mean by that? A good salesperson is going to sell more in 1 hour than a bad salesperson. Okay, or a person who knows your product is going to sell more than a person who doesn't know your product. Okay, so these things together will grow your sales. And it might, I don't know if it sounds simple or it doesn't sound intuitive, but essentially, if you think in terms of growing these three things at all times, that those are the KPIs. That's where you want to focus on in terms of growing your sales. Okay, getting into new markets, but the right markets, right? Getting into markets where there's where there are the right markets for your product. Getting more sales hours, either by getting new distributors or getting your distributors to give you more hours, and then getting more competency, either by getting better distributors or increasing the competency of your distributors. Okay, so this is sort of the cornerstone of everything I talk about. And we're going to talk about that now in the context of onboarding agreements and basically setting expectations. Okay, this is I always say every month, I say this is my least favorite part of the lecture, because I don't necessarily want to have to be telling people who I am every time. I know some of you know me, some of you don't. The reason I like to do this, or I feel I have to do this, is because I'm going to tell you a lot of stuff that might sound counterintuitive. It might sound exactly the opposite of what maybe other people are telling you. But I feel pretty confident that I know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this for a very long time, okay? I've been selling for 35 years. I like to say I've done 125 quarters where I've beaten quota. I've onboarded more than 1,400 distributors. I've sold in 135 markets. And I brought in about $1 billion, a little bit more than $1 billion of purchase orders over the years, right? So I've been doing this a long time. What I talk about is from a very practical base, from experience. There are a lot of other people out there, and I'm not discounting what they have to say, who have been diplomats, or they're academics, or they're anthropologists, or they're economists, and they will talk to you about different things in terms of business. I'm looking at things from a slightly different perspective. I'm looking at that from a purely sales revenue perspective. Okay. So we got that out of the way. All right. So where we want you to be, picture a Venn diagram where we are selling in all the correct markets for your product. We have engaged, competent, and accountable distributors in every one of your markets. Okay. And we have systems and a cadence of accountability in your markets. Now, when you are there, you are basically at the best position you can be in terms of growth. Basically, what I see all the time is people who say aren't there, and then when they get there, they suddenly see a huge growth spurt. Okay, hundreds of percent. I have grown a couple of times as much as 4,000%. I've grown 4 times. I've grown 1,000%. And once I've grown 4,000%. But I've helped people grow hundreds of percent by getting into that overlapping point of the Venn diagram, right? Making sure that you have those engaged, competent, and accountable distributors selling in all the correct markets. But you also need to have these systems and cadence of accountability in place. Okay. So we're going to talk about how that works, right? So again, one of the things I've said in previous weeks or previous months is I like to put this chart where we're basically talking about competency and engagement of the partners. Okay. What we want are engaged and competent partners. We will typically drive up competency when we have driven up engagement. Okay, so if we can get the distributors to be more engaged, the chances are we can then push them to get more competent. It is more difficult to drive up competency before we get the engagement, because we're asking something from them. By definition, we're asking them to become more competent. Okay, so this is a general understanding of what we're trying to achieve, right? In terms of what we want to get with the with the partners. Okay, so this is sort of a starting point to start from. All right. And what we're going to talk about today is doing it fast. Okay, because having engaged, competent, and accountable distributors in all the right markets and systems in place in 10 years, as opposed to next year, means you are going to lose 9 years worth of revenue, right? And the distributor agreement and the discussion before you sign is critical to achieving that. Okay? All right. I want to throw out a number, which I think this is a concept that I actually came up with because I didn't hear it before I came up with it, and I use it all the time. Okay? You have this many days of engagement with your distributor once you work with them before they lose complete focus. 200, which is the number of working days in a year, more or less, divided by the number of products the company onboards every year. Now, some distributors will only take on board 1 product a year, 2 products a year. That's a little unusual. Most distributors I know are probably aiming to take on board 4 new products a year, right? Which means that gives you 50 days where you are the new person in town and you have all the focus. But what if they're bringing on board 12 new products a year? Okay, how does that impact you? They're bringing on board 12 new products a year. How many days do you really have? They're bringing on board 20 new products a year for some of these big corporations, these big distributorships, okay? This is the amount of time you have to grab their attention, get their engagement up, build up their competency, etc. So you have to be thinking in terms of this. You can't say, okay, we're going to sign them up, and then next month our training manager is free. So in 6 weeks we'll do a training, and then the regional sales manager will go out there in 3 months to run around with them. You have to be thinking about this as an as an operation, like for Mission Impossible, where the clock is ticking or the fuse is burning, and you have a very specific amount of time during which you can achieve what you want to achieve, right? And if you don't, you're just not going to achieve it. So what we want is we want to move fast once we've had the partners, basically start with us, okay? So that's what we're trying to achieve. Okay, now, by the way, again, anybody has questions, feel free. Okay, and it is a huge lost opportunity. I'll tell you, this happens to me all the time. I'll hear people and they'll say, well, I have this distributor. I thought he was a great distributor. And it turned out he's really a dud. He's not a very good distributor. And we'll talk about it. And the onboarding wasn't done very well. And more importantly, 9 times out of 10, probably 95 times out of 100, the fault in the onboarding happened related to the distributor agreement or that period of time, that period of time in between the time the regional manager or whoever interviewed the distributor, we decided we wanted to work with that distributor, and then it took so much time to onboard the distributor that we really lost the opportunity, and we were never able to recover that opportunity. And that distributor was never as good a distributor as they could have been had we taken an opportunity really to seize this at the time. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today, is really how do you seize this and make sure. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, if you remember what we talked about last time, was we talked about, we've interviewed our distributors. We know in the country, we've gone into a country, we found maybe 3-5 candidates. We've identified the one we want. We know who we want. Now, the next step is really to do a gap analysis, okay? Because the best distributor you are ever going to find is always going to be missing something. Okay? They might not. Remember, we talked about the 3 lines of a distributor, right? There's engagement, there's competency, and there is bandwidth, right? So what we want is to make sure that we have engagement, competency, and bandwidth at the correct levels for that market so that we can sell the best we can, okay? And that's what we're trying to achieve. So we have to, first of all, have an idea of what we want for that market, okay? Do we have, for that market, an ideal distributor profile? Okay, now, typically, when I talk about an ideal distributor profile, it usually is good for every market, right? But what I want to know is, what should my distributor look like? And I've talked about this maybe in every session we've done, okay? What skills does he have? We've broken down the sales process map, and we know what I expect from the distributor to do, okay? Does the distributor know how to do demos? Does he know how to do discovery calls? Does the distributor know, does he have an existing set of relationships with the right people. I want to make sure that I have that ideal distributor profile for the market. And now I'm going to do a gap analysis. Well, what is he missing? Okay, does he have the right connections? Does he have the right sales tools? Does he know how to do the parts that I want? Now, very often, and maybe what do we have here? 25, 30 people. I'm sure some people are saying, but of course does, he's a distributor, right? Well, yes and no. Depending on what he's selling today, he might not need to do the types of things that you work with. He might be selling, and I get this all the time. I'll talk to a client and I'll say, well, who exactly is he selling to? And they'll say, well, he's selling to hospitals. I'll say, yeah, but who in the hospital? I guess purchasing. Well, no, your product is being sold to cardiologists, right? So you need to have somebody who knows cardiologists. If he has really, really good connections with radiologists, he might not know any cardiologists. He might not even know how to talk like a cardiologist. Okay, and that's in medical. But in every field, that's pretty correct. Now, that doesn't mean, obviously, we've gotten to the point where we want to work with him. We have passed by and we've said, you know, this isn't critical. You're the best partner I can find. You might not have this or this or this component of what I see would be the ideal distributor profile, but you're still a very good partner and you have a lot going for you. But what I need to be able to do is document what I want from him and document what he's missing. That gap analysis on the ideal distributor profile is very important at this stage before we put pen to paper, right? Because I need to be able, and you'll see why in half an hour or so. But essentially, I need him to be able. I need to be able to tell him what I want from him and how I want him to improve what he's doing. Okay, bandwidth is the next thing, right? So I'm going to say, well, do I have enough bandwidth? Does he have enough bandwidth? Now, we talked about this a little bit before. Again, you can find this if you reach out. I have this written down very, very well in one of the ebooks that I gave out and in the notes, and it's in one of the lectures. I really go into depth on this. But what we want to do is say, well, do we have enough bandwidth? Do we have enough boots on the ground, enough sales hours to represent my product in this particular market? Okay. Now, what do I need to know? What do I need to calculate in order to figure that one out? Well, I need to say, well, how many hours is it going to take to sell one of my products? One purchase order. Okay, either a project or however I sell. Maybe I'm selling a fast-moving consumer good, but I need to get it on the shelf of a major supermarket, right? How many hours of work is it going to take to get onto the shelf of that supermarket? Or let's say I'm selling a big project to the government. How many hours of work is it going to take for me to get the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Transportation to buy my product? Okay, so I want to figure that out. And I can, what I like to do is actually do a couple of different calculations. Well, what do I want to see in terms of sales from this market? Okay, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how I get to that number later. But if I need to see 100 purchase orders out of Saudi Arabia next year, and it takes 8 hours to get a purchase order to sell my product, then I need 800 hours. Okay. The other thing that I like to calculate is, well, how many potential clients are there, right? So let's say there are 1,000 potential clients in Saudi Arabia, and I want my distributor to talk to each one of them at least twice. And maybe that's a 1 hour conversation. So I'll say, okay, so that's a 2,000 hour investment of time to cover Saudi Arabia. Okay. So those are two ways of looking at that. And once I have those numbers, I might blend them together. I might say, okay, year one, we're just doing conversations. Year three, I need a certain amount of sales. So a reasonable balance of that is I'm going to ask for 1,000 hours a year of bandwidth. Okay, and by that I basically mean how much is the distributor's team focused on selling my product? How much of their time are they putting into it? And for general considerations, I like to consider a full-time equivalent sales year to be 2,000 hours. Okay, so basically, if I say, okay, one person will be working full-time on my product, that's 2,000 hours. Now, again, from a bandwidth perspective, maybe I'm saying what I really need are 4 people in 4 different cities, and they will each put in 250 hours. Okay, now with certain products and certain markets, I might be asking for 8 full-time equivalents to be my partner because I have such a great product that is so profitable that if they want to represent me, they need to give me real bandwidth. But you have to be realistic on this also and understand what they will probably be willing to invest. Okay. One of the things I talked about earlier in one of the previous days was it is unlikely that your partner, your distributor, will change his sales team for you. Okay. And by that, I mean, if he has 3 salespeople and you say, but you need to have 6 salespeople to be my distributor, it is highly unlikely that he's going to hire 3 salespeople to cover your product. Okay. Now he might hire, he might increase by 10% his sales force. It's much more likely to be able to tell them, okay, by the 3rd year, you have to have added 2 salespeople. But off the top, this is probably the most unlikely thing that your distributor will do, will be to add salespeople. On the other hand, very often what you need is you need him to add, say, technical people or service people, right? You could say, look, if you want to sell my product, you need to have a very specific type of service person who can provide technical service, and you don't have them on your team. So if you want to be my distributor, you need to hire somebody who has those technical skills. Okay. So I just kind of reiterate, because this is sort of a complicated sentence that I've figured out over 30 years experience. But you can get people to hire technical people. You can get your distributor to add service people, technical people, support people. They might add salespeople, but it's highly unlikely. Usually, if you say to them, look, in order to sell my product, you have to add an engineer with these skills, a software person with these skills, a technical person, that they will do. If you say you need to hire 2 new salespeople, that's less likely. In most of the world, in most markets, it's harder to hire a good salesperson than it is to find a good technical person who can support you. Okay. But at this point, we are still at that those days or hours before we send the distributor a contract. We're trying to calculate, well, what is he missing? We're still in the gap analysis. Does he need a specific technical person? Now, every time I've worked with a company like this, I like to actually put down within the ideal distributor profile what those tasks are with job descriptions. So I can say, we need a certain type of technical person, because honestly, I'm not going to remember those details. And a lot of salespeople won't, right? If I need a software person with very specific software knowledge, I probably won't remember this. So I want to have this written down someplace where I can find it. And so when I talk to them, I can say, this is what you need, right? So anyway, now this is the next step of the gap analysis. I've come up and I've said, these are the manpower requirements that you're going to need. in order to work with us, right? I am going to plan training as part of the gap analysis. Okay, so for instance, I'm basically going to say, well, I know that you guys know how to do this and this and this, but I also have realized that you don't know this and this and this, right? So here are three major subjects that you need help with, and that you are going to have to learn from me, and I'm going to document this, right? And I don't want to sound like secretive or anything, but when I get to the end of the gap analysis, you'll see where I'm going. But I'm documenting what they need, all these different things. And part of that shopping list of the gap analysis is specific training. They're going to need, virtually always, they're going to need technical training. They will probably need certain types of sales training, right? Because they need to be able to sell your product. They may need to be able to explain your industry. They might need to know about your competitors, right? All of this stuff, you should be able to document exactly what they need to know in order to sell your product, right? And you're going to get this from your interview with them. You should have a fair gap analysis. Maybe after you've interviewed them, you then talk again with them to build up a better gap analysis. You want this to be as detailed as possible because you want to really identify everything that they need to learn in order to sell your product. Basically all the things that they're missing as of today, right? And these, I like to make these types of trainings into sort of modules, so I can say, you know what, I just talked to this guy in Turkey. Boy, he knows my industry inside and out. I don't need to teach anything about my industry. That said, he does need to know about my product. So I'm going to skip the module about the industry, but I'm going to make him take the module about my product, right? I was selling a product a few years ago that was only sold to government agencies, okay, around the world. And what I found was I inherited essentially a bunch of distributors that were not used to selling to the government. They were more used to selling to doctors' offices, which was a mistake, but it was something I had to live with. And so one of the training programs I set up was explaining enterprise selling, helping people understand the difference between selling to a one-person decision-making unit and selling to a government, which was, maybe a 6 or 7 person decision-making unit, and walking them through that. That was part of the training they needed. So as part of this gap analysis that we're doing, and this is a fast, furious process because we're getting ready as quickly as possible to do this gap analysis, but that's part of what's going to happen. And again, if you have this prepared ahead of time, if you have the modules, you can just go through and say, okay, I'm going to check off A, they need A, they don't need B, they need C, they don't need D, right? And this will go faster for you. Speed is of an essence at this point in time. Okay. The playbook. I think I spoke last time about building a playbook. And for me, the playbook is really the cornerstone of my communications with the distributor and how I get more information from the distributor and pass more information to the distributor. All of my communication, all my training, my coaching, etc. And the way I like to work with this is an online app, which can be accessed by phone or by iPad or by computer. And that way it can be updated constantly. And I make a very, very good playbook. I think the playbook is a very important part of international sales to distributors to get that training up there. That said, a lot of distributors and a lot of their salespeople do not touch my playbook, right? Which drives me nuts because, I'm working with one client now, and one of their distributors, they gave access to like 6 salespeople, and none of them in the first 6 weeks opened the playbook, right? And because the playbook is online, we can tell if they're opening it, how long they're spending on it, what components they're using, etc. But we saw they're not doing anything. So you can, in fact, again, you have to figure out what they need from this, because we're going to put this into what we ask of them, okay? So we say, we have asked for, let's say, 6 order full-time equivalents working on my product, okay? I want 6 people from that team to work on my product. I want them all to log into the playbook, and I want them all to spend a certain amount of time on the playbook. We can put in an online playbook, we can put quizzes, right? We can put certainly a way to monitor how much time they're spending, right? So I can say, look, your people should be spending in the first month, they should each be spending, 200 minutes, right? Which is only 10 minutes a day. They should be spending with the playbook. They should be getting used to it. They should do these 6 quizzes, which means they've learned a section and they've done the quiz for that section. Okay. So I'm going to figure this out as part of my gap analysis. What do they need to do to become proficient? Okay. I want them to spend a certain amount of time in the playbook. I want them to do specific quizzes. I want them to do specific coaching sessions. I can say, they need to, everybody needs to read through certain chapters of the playbook and then set up coaching sessions or that kind of thing. I can plan all of this as part of the gap analysis. And again, what I'm trying to do is build up the competencies of these partners. Now, by doing this also, I'm hoping that I will also build up the engagement, because if they're attending training and they're working on the playbook and they're working with coaching and all of that, this should also drive up engagement. I'm also going to ask them to join my community. Right now, I think we've spoken about this. I like to build a community of distributor salespeople. Okay. Now, this community could be something like an online mastermind that happens once a month. It could be a WhatsApp group. It could be both. It could be a Slack channel. What I want to do is make sure that the salespeople who are selling my product feel connected to my product, my company, and the community of salespeople. The value of this is huge. Remember, at the very beginning of today, I talked about the importance of engagement and how engagement will drive competency. If the distributors do not feel engaged, or more importantly, the distributor salespeople do not feel engaged, it is very hard to push them to become more competent in selling your product. The community is one of those things that will drive up engagement. Now, most adults, to be honest, they might really enjoy being part of a community, but they always feel a little, I don't know if shy is the right word, or reluctant to be pushed into joining a business community or a work-related community. People will come back and they'll say, well, I have enough friends. I don't need to waste an hour a week in this or something like that. So you do have to push, but I feel that once you push them, they will actually embrace it and feel comfortable there and move forward with it. Okay. So what we're trying to do really is force them into joining the community. And in order to do that, we have to quantify. To begin with, we have to quantify, what does that look like, okay? And again, you can say, well, I want everybody to join the community and I want everybody to come to the masterminds. All the salespeople have to join all the masterminds. And we can basically put this as part of the gap analysis plan. Okay. The cadence of accountability. Okay. And I like to talk about this. I got this term from a book called The Four Secrets of Execution, or The Four Masters of Execution, or something like that, which is a really good book. And it's about getting things done on an ongoing way with a cadence. Okay. And I like that term. I've used that term right now several times. Let me explain what I mean. When you sign a distributor, you typically say, well, very often people say, well, you have to keep me updated on stuff, or we're going to have periodic discussions about stuff, right? And again, I would say 9 times out of 10, or maybe even 99 times out of 100, this is not well defined, okay? And what we want to try and do is define this very well. We want to basically say we are going to have meetings at certain time points. Those meetings will include this and this and this, and they will be between these people and that people. Okay, well, so let me give you an example of that, right? What I basically say is, okay, so first of all, you need to update my CRM, right? You need to update my CRM, right? You need to give me certain information on a weekly basis or a daily basis. Okay. You need to show up to certain meetings, right? So I could say, well, we're going to have a weekly meeting between the regional sales manager and the salespeople. We're going to have a monthly meeting that includes the owner of the distributorship. And then we're going to have an annual meeting where my CEO and the distributors get together and talk, etc. And there might be, different levels of meetings in between through that, but we're setting in place a cadence of accountability. We're also saying, well, our expectation is that you're going to be hitting certain KPIs. I'm going to talk a little bit about those KPIs in a minute, but we're setting in place, first of all, the idea. Now, this can be a pretty radical thing because remember, we are not their boss. They are an independent business person. And I like to tell, the story, which some of you may very well have heard this story before because I tell it a lot, where when I was at a 25, 26, I was the regional sales manager for this company. I'm talking to a distributor and I'm saying, I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to do this. He says to me, he goes, hey, Zach, how big is your boat? I said, oh, sorry, what do you mean? He goes, how big is your boat? And I said, I don't have a boat. He goes, look, Zach, I have a 45-foot boat. When you have a 46-foot boat, you come back and tell me what to do, okay? But until then, don't tell me what to do. And that, you got to keep in mind, very often you're working with distributors who are very, they're very successful, they're rich, they're very good at their jobs, and they don't necessarily want to get pushed around, right? And a lot of companies, a lot of manufacturers, a lot of sales managers hesitate to set that cadence of accountability. Now, what I've found is when you do this from the very beginning and you do it in a very respectful way, but you are firm and you structure it correctly, they will respect you for it. They will actually think that you're their best principal. They'll say, Zach, he has this fantastic system in place. None of my other principals have this system in place. This is great. He's very professional. And I get that a lot from people. It's difficult to instill this cadence of accountability with an existing distributor after several years. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. Setting it up at the beginning is always a positive experience, right? I've never had a distributor say, hey, this is totally off the wall. I'm not going to sign this. They might push back and say, hey, you're asking me to, you're asking me to spend 2 hours a week on filling in the CRM. This is crazy. I'm not going to do it. But if you ask them for something reasonable, 15 minutes a week to fill out the CRM, a short meeting once a week, or a meeting with the salesperson and not the distributor owner, and then a meeting with the distributor owner every month, those things are reasonable and they will be accepted, and really no argument with that. Okay. Now, we're also going to have to put together, before we start working, we're going to put together goals. We're going to calculate the financial goals. What are our targets for the market? Okay. And this is really, really difficult, but it's really, really important. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, people I work with screw this up. Okay. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's think about what do we want to achieve out of a market financially, and can we really sharpen in on this and quantify it? Okay. And very often we are doing this from a pure guessing standpoint. Okay. But can we figure out why exactly people buy our product? Okay. What triggers it? How could we measure the opportunities? And I'll give you an example, a very specific example for one of my clients. One of my clients sells a product that's used in a very specific medical procedure, right? It's not used in any other medical procedures, but theoretically, for every medical procedure of that type, there is an opportunity to use her product. Okay. Now, she sells in a lot of countries, including Europe, where the primary buyer of that procedure, the person who pays, is the government. So what I was able to do was essentially find a government organization that had records of how many of that procedures took place every year with complete accuracy, because they paid for them. So then I was able to say, okay, so Denmark does 1 million of these procedures a year. That is 1 million opportunities to sell my product, right? So I'm gonna figure this one out. Germany does 10 times as many, right? And that way I can keep track of all the different markets, and I can keep track of what my goal, my fiscal or my commercial expectation is from each market. Now, a lot of people just don't do this, or they do it in a very sloppy way. They say, well, let's say $200,000. I'm selling $100,000 in Portugal. You're bigger than Portugal. Let's say 200,000. But you can really figure this out and set in place the financial goal, the target money that you want out of this market. Okay. The other part of this is activities or time, right? How much time do we want out of this market? And I talked a little bit earlier about how you break this down, but we want to really break this down and say, our expectation is that you're going to be putting into this market 100 hours a year, 500 hours, 2,000 hours a year. And I want to, just like I talked about a couple of minutes ago, I want to really break this down really carefully into what my expectations are. Okay. Without this, if you don't know what to ask for, you're not going to ask for it, right? And we want to have all this. So now we've basically put together this whole list of things that we want, right? And we know that we need to ask for. Okay. Now that we have these, we can build KPIs, right? So these KPIs can be our dashboard, so that we know what we want the distributor to be doing. The revenue, right? The sales activities, the hours, the training, in today's world, social media, marketing. We can figure out all the different KPIs we need to see from this distributor in order to get the right level of sales out of the market. Okay, and what could those KPIs be? Well, we talked a couple of times ago about the sales process map, right? So we could say, well, we're expecting you to come up with 100 new leads a month. We're expecting you to have 12 new intro meetings every month. We're expecting you to do 6 demos a month, et cetera, right? All of this can be documented, and it should be written down, at least on your side, before you actually write a contract to work with this new distributor. Now, you don't have to put each and every KPI in the contract. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but you have to have a good, at least initial estimate of what all these KPIs should be, right? Now, again, I like to say that I want to come up with a perfect situation, and then I'm willing to be flexible about it. Okay, so we might come up with a lot of KPIs. We might come up with very high demands, and then we could say, okay, but we're really not going to see this until the 3rd year. So year 1, I'm going to be flexible, and I'm going to ask for a quarter of what I really want. Year 2, maybe I'm going to ask for half of what I really want, and then year 3, I'm going to ask for what I want. Okay, so we plan it that way, but we have to start off. It's really critical to start off by knowing what it is that you want, right? Okay, now we come to the whole part of, we'll talk about the agreement, and it is really important for me to say that I am not a lawyer. Okay, so everything I say here, do not consider this legal advice, and talk to your lawyer about it. Okay, this is business advice, and I'm going to talk to you about business advice. What I find is a lot of people in, the regional sales managers, the VPs of sales, the people in business ignore the element of building the agreement, and they pay for it later because it impacts revenue. Now, I'm going to tell you, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so you have to get your lawyer involved, and your lawyer is the one that decides, or your CEO talking to your lawyer will decide. I'm just telling you what I do to drive revenue. Okay, I don't want somebody to sue me 2 years from now because I gave them legal advice. I am not giving anybody legal advice. Okay. So I'll tell you a few things that I want to do with an agreement. I shape all of my agreements around the 1st of January. What do I mean by that? If we start working together today, okay, today is July, I'm going to give you a year and a half on your 1st term. I would end the 1st term on the 31st of December, 2026, and then it would renew for a year each time. I'll tell you why I do that. This is just a little trick that I've learned over the past 35 years. What you don't want are to have 100 distributor agreements that all end at a different time of year, right? If they all end on the 31st of December and start on the 1st of January, you know that that's the case, and you can plan around it, right? And then you can say, okay, I'm going to review everybody in November, or I'm going to review everybody in September, so that I can make a decision in November if I'm going to renew them or not. So I have 3 months notice to give them, etc. Okay, so that's sort of the first thing I would say specifically about writing up the contracts. Okay, I will put in a clear-cut calendar of activities, and this will be at least for the first 2 years. Now, why do I say at least for the first 2 years? Because I don't know what the revenue is going to be in the beginning, right? I know what I might target. I know what might be possible, or what I think is possible. But what I want to do is put in these the activities I expect from you over the next 2 years. Okay, and this will be in the contract. So I'm gonna, having gone through the whole gap analysis, and we've talked about this. Now, these activities are going to include everything that I talked about: training, personnel, hiring people, interacting with the playbook, coaching. What do I expect from them in terms of the sales process? How many intro meetings, how many leads, how many demos, et cetera, right? This does not talk about revenue, but this deals with all the different aspects of the other stuff that I want from them, okay? And I'm going to build this into a list. I'm also going to add to that revenue from the second year, okay? And that now we could come and ask for specific revenue in the first year. Everybody likes to do it. Usually, what's very important to me is that the only criteria not be revenue. Very often we come and we say, well, we're going to put together an agreement, and we're going to ask the distributor to give us $250,000 in orders in year 1 or in year 2, right? And usually the only remedy to not getting that is to terminate them. So then you have to decide, well, am I terminating them because they didn't put in enough revenue, or am I not terminating them? But by now you've already lost a year. So if you know what the activities are, then you can already see from the beginning of the year if they are doing those activities or not. And if they're not doing those activities, you have the option to terminate them or to do whatever the remedy is in the agreement. Okay, and this is very important. If it's just revenue, you typically can't terminate them until after the term of the agreement is over, and they say, yes, I only put in $50,000. The agreement said I had to put in $250,000. You're going to terminate me over this, and then you have to decide if you are or not, right? And this just drags it out. Whereas if you've put in activities that they're supposed to do in the first 45 days and they don't do it, now you have an early opportunity to terminate them and replace them if that's what you want to do. Okay, so this is the way I would structure this, and you need to have this basically built up, right? Okay, this symbol is supposed to be the philosophic logical symbol for if then, but what I want to have in my agreement is if the distributor does this, then the distributor will be the only distributor in the territory, okay? And I'll talk a little bit now about the concept of exclusivity. All the distributors want to be exclusive. Me personally, I really only like to work on an exclusive model. That's my position, okay? I like to have one distributor in a territory because I really want that person, that company, to be very dedicated to building up my brand name. I want that person to know that they are always going to benefit from any sale and any activity that they do. It gives them buy-in to my brand. It builds up engagement. Now, I've worked with many clients and companies that don't want to do exclusivity. And I'll tell you, there's a problem with the word exclusivity, because when you make somebody your exclusive distributor, you are giving him a large piece of legal power over you. In some countries, it is virtually impossible to change your exclusive distributor. So if you make somebody your exclusive distributor, there is a chance you are stuck with that company forever, and they could keep you out of that market if they wanted to, okay? On the other hand, you can put in your contract, if you do these activities, I will not let anybody else sell in your territory, okay? Which is de facto exclusivity without saying the word exclusive, okay? It also allows you a really easy out where you can say to somebody, hey, you have not been doing what you're supposed to be doing. I am letting somebody else sell in your territory. I'm not terminating you, but you know, I'm letting somebody else sell in your territory. I might even be giving him lower prices than you. So if that's the case, you probably want to resign. Okay, so you can squeeze somebody out for not doing what they're supposed to do without taking them to court. Okay, again, not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice. As commercial advice, this is some pretty good commercial advice because it works really well. Okay, so again, I don't like to work with more than one distributor in a territory, but there are good reasons not to use that word exclusive. Okay, so if you have this if then clause in your agreement, you say, if you do this, then I will not appoint any additional distributors in your territory. This is a pretty good way to get what you want out of the agreement as well as what the distributor wants out of the agreement. Okay, this is an appendix. I put this in because what I want to say is all these things that I'm talking about should go into the appendix of the agreement. Okay, and what I basically do with the appendix of the agreement is every agreement will be virtually identical except for the date and the name of the person who signs it, basically, right? Sorry, the date, the name of the distributor, and the name of the person and title of the person who signs it. And then I will refer in the agreement, I will say territory as per Appendix A, product as per Appendix B, activities expected as per Appendix C. Now that way, I can change everything in the appendix and I don't have to worry about going through the agreement and making sure that I've changed everything. It's a very good system. Again, I didn't think this one up. A lawyer thought this one up. I've been doing this for 30 years. It works out really well. Hopefully, you'll find yourself with 25 or 40 or 50 distributors covering the world, and you're going to have a lot of these agreements. They're going to change. You're going to have to renew them, etc. Keeping all of the variables in the appendix is a really good system. In the appendix, okay, there every now and again in the middle of one of these, I look at an icon I made and I'm trying to figure out what I was trying to say with that. In the appendix, what we're going to talk about is yeah. Oh, yes, of course, pricing. So basically, we're going to put in the pricing, right? We're going to talk about what the pricing is for the distributor, right? And that will typically be by discount, right? So we say we have the manufacturer's list price. We will say your discount is 40% or 50% or 30% off of that manufacturer's list price. And we will also say something like, these prices are subject to change with 30 or 90 or 180-day notice. I like to tell people we won't change the price for anything that you have already put a quote out for. If you can afford to do that, that's good because it calms down the distributor dramatically. And then I would also say, when do you change your price list? And typically, what you could say is, well, we have the right to change it with 90 days notice, but we typically change it on the 1st of September every year, something like that. If you could put all of that in, that is really helpful. You want to clarify the territory. And one trick that I always use, or one thing that I always suggest to people, is I Google the official name of the country, right? Because we have a tendency to write in Egypt when it's actually the Arab Republic of Egypt, right? Or Saudi when it's actually the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, right? So I like to check what the legal name is of the country and put it down. Now, keep in mind, you can put in a distributor's territory, you can say the government markets of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You can say the private sector, okay? Various other ways of playing around with it. So you can really define what you want that territory to be. Like I said, I like to have one distributor in a territory, but you could also keep what you might call house accounts, or you could say, well, we've already dealt with this particular customer. We will continue to deal with this particular customer for the next 2 years. After that, we will shift him to you, or something like that. All of this can be put down in the appendix that deals with territories, right? And you want this to be clear, right? Now, there are legal implications for telling people that they can't sell outside of the territory. So you have to check with your lawyer on this, but you also want to make it clear to them that you don't want them selling outside of their territory, because that's going to create problems for you in the future. So you might not be able to tell them they can't, but you may be able to tell them you will penalize them, right? Like, you are giving them full discount on everything that gets sold to their territory. You are not giving them any discount on anything that's sold outside of their territory, or something along those lines. Pricing. So again, I guess I missed an icon. I'm not quite sure what I wanted to say with that icon. But pricing I discussed. Okay. Activities. What we want to break down all the activities that we want from that distributor, and that goes to everything that I was talking about, right? From the very beginning: training, playbook. Do I want that distributor to hire specific people? Do I want that distributor to get people to engage on my community, to engage a certain amount on my playbook? I can break that down. Then I want to go into the whole sales process. What do I want from that distributor in terms of the sales process? I want to really, really break this down, and I want to start it from essentially the minute the signature goes on the contract, right? When do they give me a plan? When do they start calling on people? When do they start training? All of that has to be really well defined, right? And you're, essentially with these agreements, you really want to, with these agreements, you really want to have a way out, right? Everybody you talk to, or very often I talk to manufacturers, or I talk to lawyers, and they have this sort of fantasy that they might end up, in Brazil with a team of 10 lawyers trying to sue somebody. You don't want that. You never want to be in a position to sue anybody or anything like that. It's not good for business. What you want is to be able to get out of this contract as quickly as possible if they're not doing what you want them to do. So you can't get out of a contract if they're not doing what you want them to do if you haven't clarified what it is you want them to do. So if you clarify it, you put it down with a timetable and all the activities, now you have a good way to keep track of what you want them to do. Okay. You want this to be, you want to clarify all the different activities and the timeline of the activities. Okay. Sorry, I talked about activities. You want to keep track of the revenue, right? What do you want in terms of revenue? What are the targets in terms of revenue? Okay. Now you could also say, this could be in dollars. It could be in installations. It could be, I've had contracts where I've said, my expectation is you will sell one system to the Ministry of Health and one system to a large private group within the first year. Okay, so you can define this pretty clearly, right? You can, let's say you have you know that that the distributor is really, really comfortable selling to the government and not in the private sector. But they pushed you and they asked you to have the private sector as part of their territory. So you could say, look, I need $1 million revenue from the government and $1 million revenue from the private sector. You can put that in your appendix, your agreement, because this is what's important to you. You can put in, you need to sell 5 units of my basic model and 3 units of my top of the line model. Okay, you can define this in the way that will reach your goals, in the way that you think is important to your business goals, in the same way that you are doing this with an employee. Right? If you're a manufacturer and you just launched a new product, it is very common where you say to your salespeople, you say, well, okay, 80% of your sales can be the old model, but you have to be selling 20% of the new model, right? You can do that with your distributors too. You just have to be able to define that well and make sure you put it in. One thing I realized what I left out here with the unidentifiable icon that I put in, trying to be too fancy, I guess. Keep everything as simple as you possibly can, okay? Because what I found is everybody tries to do this a little bit too fancy, and they get a little bit too detailed with stuff. Now, I've just been telling you how detailed you should be with the sales stuff, and that's it. Like, I'm a sales guy. Be as detailed as you need to be with everything related to revenue. All this stuff that I'm talking to you about, yes, be very detailed about it. What you want to be very careful about is all the stuff, people will come in and they'll put in 3 pages about copyright infringement, about their trademarks and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying intellectual property isn't important. I'm saying a lot of this stuff that can possibly slow down your sales, but isn't necessarily going to be enforceable in Brazil anyway, you might suggest to the lawyer to take it out of the agreement and keep everything as simple as possible, okay? Another thing that's going to go in your appendixes is your toolkit. You are committing to giving them certain tools, right? Because you don't want the agreement to only be one way. I need them to do this. 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 I'm also saying I am going to give you a great toolkit. I'm going to give you sales enablement tools. I'm going to give you all sorts of great marketing tools. I'm going to support you at trade shows. You have access to the playbook, all of this stuff, and you can put that right in the appendix to the agreement. Okay. Now, this is the agreement that I talked about. I'm going to probably be finishing up in a couple of minutes, so we're going to have time. Okay, I see somebody. Okay, somebody talks about brand awareness. Great. I'll talk about that. But if anybody has questions, in a couple of minutes, I'll sort of be rounding off what I was looking to talk about, and I'll be happy to talk about questions. Now, the last thing I'm going to be talking about is an LOI, a letter of intent. Okay, this is magic as far as I'm concerned. It's one of the most powerful tools that I've encountered in my selling, and I'm not exaggerating here with this. Typically what happens is, let's say you go to Thailand, you talk to somebody, they're great, you're great, your product is great, they're going to sell your product, everybody's happy. You put together this agreement that I'm talking about, which is full of details, and you send it to them. Your lawyer takes maybe a month to write the damn thing. You send it to them, their lawyer takes maybe a month to read the damn thing. And then by the time it comes back to you with 25 big red marks, so it goes back and forth, and it takes months before anybody is selling anything. Now, the distributor isn't going to sell a penny until you've figured out the agreement, because he doesn't want to put any effort into this if he doesn't know he's going to get compensated. So everything gets slowed down. Now, remember at the beginning, what did I say? You have 200 divided by the number of new products that distributor is taking on board this year. That's all the days you get to onboard your distributor and keep him engaged and moving forward, keep this momentum going. Okay, so how do we move this forward with a letter of intent? Now, I love letters of intent. I like I said, it's almost magic. What do I do with a letter of intent? I basically say, I, Zach, have every intention of hiring you as my distributor in this territory. I want you to sell my product. This is what the basics of it. I have a product X, you have services Y, you're going to do this, and I will not talk to any other distributors about this territory for the next 30 days. It is my intention that we get this full agreement signed within this 30-day period. Now, this does two things. First of all, it gives the distributor the confidence to start selling tomorrow. And they do. They always do. Like, by the time my wheels are moving at the airport tarmac, they're starting to sell. Okay. And they might sell something by the time I land. You never know, but they're moving. This is the one way to really get them moving. The other thing is, now we've put a deadline on when that agreement needs to be signed. Okay, so we can't stretch this out 4 months. They have a month to do it, or however many days I put in the LOI. And now they have a serious incentive to try and sign this, because they don't know if in 30 days I might say, okay, you didn't sign the contract, I'm going to move to my alternative number 2, right? So everybody wants to move forward. Okay, this is a fantastic tool. It's sort of hard to see, but basically, I'll read this. Following our discussion, it is our intention to appoint you as our distributor for the territory of X. I'm attaching a PDF of our agreement for you to review. If this meets your approval, we will send you 2 hard copies of our agreement. Please sign them and send them back. We will then sign them both and return one for you. Boy, you can see how old this is, because this is, when we used to keep all this stuff in paper copies and no DocuSign or anything. Please note, it is our expectation to have this agreement signed within 90 days from date. Until that time, we're suspending any discussions with potential distributors in your territory. If we cannot get this agreement signed by 90 days from today, we may have to offer a distributorship to an alternative partner for this territory. While you are looking into the legal aspects of this agreement, we want you to feel comfortable starting to work representing us in your territory, as we do not want to waste any time. This letter will serve as a letter of intent and a summary of the primary issues and terms of the agreement. Please sign this and send me a scanned copy back. This will serve as our partnership agreement until we sign the primary agreement documents. Once the primary partnership agreement is signed, that agreement supersedes this letter of intent. Okay. And then basically I have here 3 paragraphs that summarize what we want from them and what they can expect from us. Okay, so this is basically a letter of intent, and I'm happy to share this with people or talk to people. Again, basically, like I said, keep everything that isn't related to sales as simple as possible. Okay, I cannot reiterate this enough. Every distribution agreement I ever see is just full of stuff that doesn't need to be there. Now, again, not a lawyer. So if your lawyer says put it there, put it there. But if you can get it out, right? Anything that isn't going to help you sell more is just a waste of time in the agreement, because in the end of the day, I've been doing this a long time. Like I said, 1,400 distributors I've onboarded. I've never taken a distributor to court, right? So, you got to keep in mind that what you want on this is speed. You want them to be selling as fast as possible. If you are going to be selling, say, $1.2 million in a territory, every month you delay is $100,000, right? That's like $5,000 a working day. So do this, get everything done as quickly as you possibly can. Okay, and at this point, with 10 minutes to spare off the official timeline, I am open for questions. So while everybody is thinking, Jerry, can you talk about brand awareness and reputation? KPIs for brand awareness and reputation. Okay. So yes, the brand awareness is really important. Like I said, I believe that if you only have one distributor in a territory, they have a bigger incentive to work on brand awareness. Now you can talk about activities, okay? Advertising, showing up at trade show, doing different types of PR, okay? You can specify that they can only use certain brand tools that you give them. And I'll give you an example that I still find a little silly. I worked once with this medical device years ago, and for whatever reason, the designer didn't like the device to be have a picture taken of it from one angle. He only liked the other angle. So we literally put in the contract the agreement that they had to use photographs from a list of photographs that we sent them, specifically so they wouldn't show the product from the unflattering angle, okay? So you can do that. I like to have, as part of my sales tools in the playbook, I will have all sorts of graphic pictures. I'll tell you something we've had. I've seen over the years distributors put pictures in that we in America might consider racist or not politically correct. So we've put in the agreement that they have to use specific pictures of people, that kind of thing. You can put in a lot of stuff like this to protect your brand, right? The last thing you want is somebody in a different market suddenly seeing an advertisement that you feel when you look at it is objectionable, right? Might show you off in a non-flattering way. Okay. Now that's the activities. Like I said, there are always activities, and then there are metrics, there are lead indicators, there are activities, and then lag indicators, which happen after the fact, right? So you could also say, well, in 3 years, we would like to be able to do a poll and have a certain amount of name recognition, right? We would like to have a certain amount of positive feedback about our brand reputation. But that, should be 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. And those really are, to be honest, they're difficult to quantify. But it is a good idea if you can do something like that. Do we have any other questions?
Okay. Feel free to ask a specific question as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't
Yeah.
have any general questions,
7
then
minutes on time. If anybody wants to ask a specific question about anything.
has anyone tried to implement a strategy similar and are willing to talk about your success or challenges in engaging on a similar suggestion? We welcome any kind of conversation. Okay, well, while you're thinking, this is Melissa again. Um, I am going to let you know about some upcoming follow-on webinars, but feel free to type in the chat or just take yourself off mute and start to speak. I have no problem with that. In follow-up, our next session with Zach is August 13th, and Zach will be covering international distributor management. So Zach, do you want to speak for a second about what to expect from that?
Oh yeah, so again, we're getting into the section of this. Everybody sort of gets excited about the first couple of sessions, like finding distributors and that kind of thing. But really, the gold is in these managing distributors, the seemingly boring parts, like today's session. There's a lot of potential ROI in building your distributor agreement correctly. There's a huge amount, most of my clients today are very, very experienced people who want my help on building up these systems for managing their distributors on an ongoing basis. This is where the real revenue is, the real growth potential is, right? So I'm very excited about next month's session. It should be really interesting. But I would also say that even people, I mean, I'm looking at some of the people, I know some of the people on this, like Lisa was here. Is Lisa still here? But some of the people here are very experienced people, right? And where they, but they have a lot of opportunity to benefit from tweaking their day-to-day management of their existing distributor groups. And that's what we're going to be talking about next month.
Great. And then in September, on September 17th, will be the last of our series of 6, and you'll be talking about how to approach trade shows strategically. If you could give us a couple
And that I think
bullets on
everybody
that.
should enjoy. Yep.
Good. And our team here at EDPNC, the international trade team, has our Go Global Roadshow next week. So those of you on the call, if for some reason you didn't see the emails, we are taking expressions of interest in scheduling meetings with our foreign offices. We have international trade consultants coming to North Carolina for in-person consulting meetings from Canada, Mexico, and Europe. So our emails are in there. Jerry's email, my email. Reach out to us if you're interested in finding out more about how to get involved. We're going to 5 different locations across the state next week. On August 6th, there's going to be an export coffee talk, Unlocking North Carolina Resources for Global Growth. Our North Carolina Community College Workforce Enhancement team is going to be describing a handful of critical tools that are available for you to ensure that you are aware of other North Carolina resources. So do we have any questions? I saw Mariano. Do you have any questions? I'm sorry, I'm not picking on you. I just saw that you brought yourself on the screen, so I thought that you might want have something. No. Okay. Sounds good.
Hi, Zach. Will you be sharing your notes from today's presentation?
It'll probably take a few days or a week, but I'll get my notes out to everybody. Or I'll get my notes out to Melissa, and Melissa can get them out to anybody. And if anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my website and ask me a question, I am at the disposal of the people of North Carolina.
Yes, thank you, Jerry, for the reminder. Yes, we do send out a very detailed follow-up notes that Zach puts together after each one of these. So in addition to being able to watch previous sessions, if you do not have the notes from prior sessions and you would like them, please reach out to my email. That's in the chat. It's Melissa.McGurk, MELISSA .MCGURK @edpnc.org. and I'd be more than happy to ensure that you have the previous detailed notes.
Melissa, sorry, Doc Carroll just asked a question. Do we have a minute to answer that?
Absolutely. Go ahead. And what I will say is we're approaching 11:30, so what I probably will do is end the recording soon, and we can, those who would like to stay on for a few more minutes can do so.
Sure. So, hey, Doc, yeah, from the perspective of the distributor agreement.
Can you read the
I'm sorry.
question, Zach? Yeah, thanks.
Sorry?
Could you read the question so
Yep,
everyone?
sorry, I was just about to do that. I realized I
Mhm.
didn't. So Zach, Carroll International is a US value-added reseller, not the original equipment manufacturer. We take original equipment manufacturers' products and sell them to the US federal and international governments as a customer of record. We're an outsourced sales team. Please discuss us using international distributors, with us being an additional link in the supply chain. So from an agreement perspective, this doesn't really have to change anything, because it's sort of like you're outsourcing your manufacturer. So you'd be just like another General Electric Medical doesn't manufacture everything that they sell through their own distribution agreements, right? They're putting their own name on it, and then they're selling it. So effectively, that's sort of the way you'd be here, is you are bundling products. Now, in your case, you don't manufacture any of it, but you're the value-added reseller. You're the company that pulls together these products and then sells them. So we talked about having a list of the product line that you're selling. Okay, so you want to have the list of the product line, and you'll talk about what the products are that you're selling, right? You'll talk about the pricing. You'll talk about the activities you expect, all of that. So from a perspective of the agreement, there shouldn't be any difference here. There might very well be, distributors might ask you about the manufacturer, and you say, well, I'm the sole, depending on your relationship, I'm the only person who can be selling this to you, or I have the rights to sell this product in Asia, and nobody else does, or whatever. Or you could say, no, you probably could source this from somebody else, but the benefit of buying it from me is that you get this package of this whole line of products, right? So those are the type of things. I don't know if that answers your question, but you know how to reach me, Doc, and you're always free to give me a call.
I do appreciate it, Zach. Thank you so much. We're definitely the fears that we have is one, being an unnecessary link in the chain, right, and getting reached around and back so that somebody comes directly to our OEM.
Right. So you got to protect yourself with that, and that actually, you can do that both ways. One is you can reach out to your OEM and say, hey, I have reached out to this company in Qatar, and can you protect me on that? And hopefully you can get protection that way. But you could also say to the distributor, well, you're not say to the distributor who the OEM is, right? Say basically, once we reach out to you, you're dealing with us, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then putting a non-circumvent clause in there, but obviously we're not trying to end up in court either, right? So I appreciate it, Zach. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Right. Any other questions from people today?
Well, thank you so much, Zach. I appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for joining. Hopefully we will see you on August 13th.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you both.